This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, everyone. As usual, we will give it another minute, and then Shiva can get started after that. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So the three parts. So basically, I just get started. So as we always said, this is basically the point where we essentially talk about what we have finished from a development cycle, so that we can get feedback from everyone. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen, and then we'll quickly get to it. Okay, so. First thing that basically want to point out is basically we've achieved SOC 2 certification. So this was something that was pending for a long time, and I think a lot of partners were asking us for this. So we've been able to get a SOC 2 certification, and you will basically see some announcements around this basically happening in the next couple of days. So we've gone through the entire cycle of putting in the compliance metrics, compliance checks, and we basically got a complete SOC 2 report with no exceptions. So that's basically the good news that we would like to share. From an updates perspective, two primary things that we wanted to focus on. First is, as you all know, that yesterday OpenSSL released a patch for a vulnerability which essentially was called Heartbleed 2. And we already released this detector last Friday, and there is a dashboard which essentially shows you all the systems that are vulnerable to this particular vulnerability. So it is advised that you basically patch these systems. Two things. One is basically when it was initially announced, it was announced as a critical vulnerability. As of yesterday, it was downgraded to high because it required, basically because it requires a CA signed certificate in order to be exploited. So with that, basically what they have done is they've degraded it to high, but it's still something that needs to be patched fairly quickly. And that's essentially what has been pointed out by everyone. Second is that there was a lot of requests in terms of, we do have the profiles that are standard profiles, and instead of us building our own profiles, we may want to add a few additional ports into this scan. So this was essentially kind of a top of the mind request that came from multiple people. So both of these are now here. So you can essentially see that for the OpenSSL vulnerability, we have kind of put up a company in the company view. We have a dashboard which says OpenSSL critical vulnerability, and you can see all the systems and basically whether it's vulnerable or not. And then you can filter it out and basically send it out to your tech team. The second is that we also made this across the global view. So you, in the global view dashboard, you can essentially see the same data. So that way, it's easy for you to essentially kind of take this across companies in case you want to basically assign it to a particular technician of yours. The next one is that what I talked about, when you want to add additional ports to the existing quick scan, you can essentially kind of provide this details in the additional ports for scan. And once you enter this additional ports for scan, it essentially will take care of it. Also, the thing is that we've added the piece called secure ports. So for each for each of the scans, you can say that from a policy perspective, outbound port 443 and 22 is allowed for this particular customer. And that is basically an accepted risk that he has taken. So don't basically mark those as a problem. So that way you can put those into the secure ports, and you have additional ports that you can add, which is basically custom to it. So that way what happens is you don't need to do the complete detailed or deep scan, but you basically know a set of ports that you want to additionally scan over a quick scan, then you can get a very quick report from this particular piece. We basically talked about the compliance rehaul. So we've actually done all the backend work for this. And now you can essentially see kind of a complete, we have essentially the categories for the different compliances. And as part of the push that will come in tomorrow, you'll actually see that you will basically get a category-wise filter. So each category can be filtered. So for example, if you take CIS, you can basically say asset configuration is basically one of the controls. And you can essentially see how you're compliant with that particular control, with that particular category, rather than basically kind of seeing everything as a flat list. So we are revamping this UI a little bit more, and that will essentially be part of a more advanced UI release that we are basically making up fairly shortly. In addition to that, basically we talked about patching. And in the last time when we talked about it, we said these things: auto patching policies, ability to define which applications can be patched and cannot be patched, ability to keep an audit trail and ticket, patching report to show patches that were updated based on time frame, and ability to define tags based on which assets can be patched automatically. Now, all of these features have been made available, and basically it's going to be rolled out. So you can have essentially kind of what is the auto patch, like what is the schedule you want to run it on, which companies you want to run it on, what are the applications that are on which you want to basically run it on. And then you can create these kinds of profiles, which says whether it's all applications or specific applications. You can also have excluded applications in there. And then you have the concept of included and excluded tags. So all assets with a particular set of tags, such as production machine, can be included, or basically you can exclude those. So you have both included and excluded tags. Anything which is an included tag will be basically patched using this particular rule. If it is in excluded tags, then they will not be touched and they will not be patched. So this gives you complete control of which assets exactly we are going to be patching in an auto patch schedule. And then you can essentially, as I said, you can specify the timeline when you want to do it. And you basically don't provide an exact time. You basically provide a window where we can essentially complete the patching, because if there are a lot of assets, then we essentially kind of space it out and make sure that the patching is successful, rather than essentially trying all of them at once and causing a bandwidth issue, which might also cause failures. Second one is, like, we have spent a lot of time on Azure AD. And I believe a lot of you also have basically kind of raised tickets, and my team has come on board and helped with those tickets. So there are specifically two items which essentially kind of we have created. We are kind of bringing this on par with the normal Active Directory in terms of the reports, etc. We are also basically kind of going to be putting this as part of the base assessment. So that work is ongoing. But with these two put in place, essentially we have complete Azure Active Directory being on par with Azure, the normal Active Directory, because we believe that that is where essentially this is going as we move into the future. And apart from this, there were basically kind of 4 things that we had taken up during the last call as part of this month's release. One was basically there was a set of UI UX fixes that were supposed to be part of the assets table. There was a requirement to do a domain white label. There was the ability to provide a custom risk score metric, and basically the ability to delete multiple tags. These were kind of 4 items that were essentially kind of marked out, which needed to be completed. We were able to complete 2. So the white label of the domain, while it is possible for on-prem instances, it is unfortunately not so easy for us to provide it on the cloud instance. And we're working through a couple of processes for being able to do that. So today we can essentially kind of create a CNAME record and basically redirect to the website in case somebody comes to the domain. But if you want it completely kind of embedded under that particular domain where it can be used, then that there are certain limitations in terms of the infrastructure we're using. And we're working with Amazon to essentially fix that up. So we'll kind of get back with an update on that particular piece during this month's sprint. On the ability to define a custom risk score metric, we already have some of the backend written. we are just working on kind of normalizing what a letter grade equals to from a star perspective and what it means from a number score perspective. So once we have that rationalization done, we can essentially kind of push that out, but we are hoping to get that done in the next couple of weeks. So basically the thing which, like, for example, this is one of the UI metrics that people wanted, the ability to select multiple assets using kind of a shift key. So basically this allows you to kind of click on one of the assets and then you click shift and then it selects everything in between that particular, between those two, this thing. So this was something that Dennis had requested. So basically this has been made available. The second one is basically when you want to manage tags, multiple tags across multiple assets, then you can essentially kind of choose multiple assets, click on manage tags, and then it shows you the combination of all the tags across all the assets. And then you can choose one or more of these tags and basically delete them across all of those assets. So this essentially has been completed. So in effect, from what we essentially planned for this month, there are these two items which are still kind of pending, which we will essentially attempt to complete as quickly as possible, at least the custom risk score metric, but the white labeling of the domain might take a little bit of time into the next cycle. But all of the other pieces essentially will be pushed in the coming Friday, and then you should basically have it all in your instance. By the way, the OpenSSL piece is already pushed and available to you because we want you to be able to kind of take this and use it in order to remediate any of the vulnerabilities that are out there. So this was essentially kind of what I wanted to share from our perspective in terms of what we've done this week. So if there are any questions, then please come on and we can basically discuss those questions. Okay, thanks, Larry. So anybody else having any questions or any concerns, anything that? Sean, we did have the ticketing docs done. We basically kind of published it also. I will basically send you a link at the end of this meeting. Thank you, Henk. So yeah, you have the managed tags. Okay. Anybody else, any questions?
So this is Mark Shu.
Hey, Mark.
I got a quick question. With the SOC 2 stuff, what's all entailed in with the compliance on that? Is it just a bunch of control reporting, or what's gonna be available to us once those announcements are made?
No, the SOC 2 stuff, Mark, was basically like CyberCNS itself got SOC 2 certified. Okay,
so are we going to be adding any controls in the compliance section for any? I know it breaks down into other frameworks. So all the frameworks that feeds up into, is that already in CyberCNS?
Yeah, most of the framework. So what we realized, Mark, actually, it's a very interesting question. So one of the things that we realized is that as we were basically doing the SOC 2, when we ran our own vulnerability tool, pretty much we found that based on those compliances, we were basically compliant. So actually we ran through the process fairly quickly because everybody was able to get compliant fairly quickly. So, as you said, I think in a future time, we can essentially add the process to essentially make even our partners SOC 2 compliant. Would that be something that everybody is interested in? Are you folks looking to go SOC 2 compliant, or would you rather prefer CMMC? That's basically one of the questions that I wanted to ask.
We are currently SOC 2 compliant. I don't know about the others.
So you basically do quarterly audits, is it, Mark?
Yes. Yep.
And basically, is there, how do you essentially kind of keep your compliance? Are you using CyberCNS for it, or are you using some other tool for doing that?
Currently, we're using some other tools, but eventually, now that you're compliant, I might change some of the hearts and minds internally. So that's why I got a lot of interest in it.
Understood. So essentially, in fact, that's some of the things that we were also discussing, saying that looking at this entire process, we would essentially kind of eventually want to be able to offer SOC 2 over here. And we essentially want to basically tie up with an agency which also can do the certification, so that it becomes easy for both the audit and the ability for you to essentially manage your infrastructure, as well as being able to offer it to any of your customers.
Perfect. Thank you.
And Mark, we have basically taken the requirements that you've given to us last month, and that essentially has been worked on. We will be basically walking through those changes with you shortly.
Perfect. Thank you.
So Chris, just a question for you. So you are SOC 2 and HIPAA compliant. From a customer perspective, how do you do the audits, Chris? Do you do it yourself, or basically do you have an external auditor?
So for our customers that have audit requirements, they have an external auditor so that we can keep that true kind of conflict of interest at bay. So they will be audited by another firm, but then we do quarterly assessments to help them keep up with that and provide documentation to the auditors.
If it's not asking too much, Chris, can I basically kind of get a ballpark estimate of how much does it cost for you to essentially kind of go in and do a SOC 2 compliance audit, and basically versus how much you can charge a customer? And again, basically, if you were given the ability to kind of perform the audit function also through an aligned agency, would you be able to charge for it?
So in our case, we're not directly, or we're not partnering with somebody to do it. It's, for example, some of our customers in the banking industry, you know, they're required to contact an external auditing firm annually, and that has to rotate every so many years. So they're not doing that through us. We're not partnering with somebody. They're going on their own to an auditing firm to do it. For our own SOC 2, I can't speak to that. I could probably get you some details though, and hit you up offline.
No, but Chris, would you be interested in being the person who offers SOC 2 to your customers, like the banking customers?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Probably not, for the reasons of conflict of interest, because we are also, in most cases, we are the managed service provider that's providing, you know, management of their firewalls, their servers, and things like that. So in order to remain neutral in the terms of the audits, we can't generally do that as well.
Understood. Justin, it's in the dashboards. It's in the company dashboard, as well as it is there in the global dashboard. See, Larry, the way it works is there are two parts, right? One is essentially you collect all the information that is basically given to you in a certain form and format. And then essentially you hand it off to virtually like a auditor who's basically a CPA or a organization which is basically a CPA equivalent. And then essentially they are certified, and they essentially kind of look at all the data that you have submitted, and based on that data, they essentially do the SOC 2 certification. They do the certification of the data that comes through. But the biggest pain for most people is essentially collecting the data and providing it in a format which an auditor can basically sign off on.
Yeah, Shiva, we're SOC 2 type 2. And so I guess there's a little confusion. There's a lot more data we have to submit that would be outside of, you know, what CyberCNS collects. And That would just be my concern. We have to submit processes and, you know, other reports. So anyway,
No, that's true, Larry. In fact, we did support the whole thing, but if as Cyber CNS, we provided you with a library of those pieces, right? So for example, let's take simple things, right? You have to do performance reviews. If you basically have your own performance review template, perfectly fine. If the system generated a performance review template that you could fill out for each of those people, yes, then it automates that process. Then you have basically the whole list of policies, whether it's data policy, cyber policy, etc. So if we are able to provide all of those templates and basically guide you towards essentially being able to create a package, which you can then give to an auditor, would that make sense is what we are trying to figure out.
yeah, I think what Tim wrote, I agree, a module or something to help us collect the information, but past that, yeah, it's way more than Cyber CNS is going to provide.
Agreed. Hey, Tim, will take that into advisement. Anything else? Julie Liu, yes, we will get you a copy of the SOC 2 report. We are working towards basically providing that on the website. Basically, if you request for it, we can basically send it to your email. So we're working on that part too.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess if there are no more questions, then basically want everyone to thank everyone for coming on this week. And I think next week, a lot of you will basically be at the IT Nation. There are going to be a few exciting announcements that are coming out even from our side, which we are under NDA right now, but watch out for those announcements. And then we'll essentially talk about those in next week's call. And we'll also basically talk about what we're going to be doing as part of the November sprint. And basically that will essentially be the content of next week's call. So if you can make it while you're at IT Nation, we'll be very happy. If you can't, have a great IT Nation next week. And thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shiva.
Thanks.